Hello there everyone and welcome back. It's been a while, but it's time to mix things up and play a style of Tyranid which, if I were to be perfectly honest, you probably would automatically assume when you think of Tyranids and their voracious nature of eating everything. For we're going to be having fun with the massive claws. And in all serious truth, this is probably going to be incredibly difficult to fleet to utilize properly, never mind the fact we have a handful of light cruisers which can be a bit hit or miss because of how easily their claws can get destroyed, being light cruisers and all that of course. But this should be fun if I can get to work, and we even got a handful of krakens to eat everything for us, and never mind the fact that if I can get them latched onto opponent and at least detonate or at least have them get killed while ramming or eating the ship, the slow speed will be amazing for any follow-up attempts, and ideally this goes into what the main strategy is probably going to be for this fleet to work. Mass chaos. Simply put, since I don't have the convenience to kind of focus on one ship without ramming my own ships in the process, we're going to have to try and jump at their entire fleet at once and let my opponent ideally panic trying to manage and control everything. And hopefully that works out well for me, especially if several of them get snared by the spore clouds, which, of course, with my flagship able to shoot spore fields in their proximity or in their direction that they're going, that can help a lot. Although, I am really reluctant because since I'm going to be jumping all the ships at once, shields can be incredibly impactful. But with what I learned with Disruption Overcharge for Mechanicus, Space Marines, and Eldari, I may be hindered quite a bit, as much as this reload to increase my shield regeneration can be impactful, assuming everything goes well, and hell, even accelerate regeneration can help to kind of prevent, at the very least, permanent damage results on my claws, which I am going to need to at least get the killing blows I want. Since boarding is not going to synergize the best unless I board like a completely separate ship that I'm not engaged with, or ideally kill off a third of the crew to maybe get that light critical hit damage to screw them over even further by destroying their deck or their engines. Either way, I want to do well with this fleet, but realistically I think it's going to be difficult, but it certainly comes down to what we're coming up against, so let's find out firsthand. Well, this is going to be interesting. Tyranid on Tyranid, I have the massive claws to do a ridiculous amount of damage to them, especially for dealing with hive ships. And hell, I have this really good shield strength, keep in mind, that's the one benefit of Tyranids as well. That kind of would work pretty decently against pyro-acid, at least initially. This is going to be awkward. I should, though, in theory, have the upper hand until at least the critical hits start compounding on my krakens, because hell, they're the only things that don't have shields. And being frigates, they're going to suffer a lot of fire results. So, in all seriousness, especially since the spore field does not work against Tyranids, even opponent Tyranids, I'm going to have to, well, speedy recovery is not terrible. I don't know how impactful it would be, since I'm not entirely certain if we're dealing with pyro-acid just yet or not. But I do like the idea of Drool Cannon maybe causing additional burn damage. Although, is it better than like a Wrecking Ball or even the spikes? I don't think these ignore armor is the big thing, which is why I'm reluctant to utilize them. Also, let's see, drone. Let's put you somewhere, maybe to grab points and possibly spot for me. And I do need to figure out my grouping, which is going to be a big factor too. Since, actually, I have 3 prowlers, 3 groups sounds perfectly fine here. Just gotta make sure I have enough frigates for this. That doesn't seem too terrible. It will need to be optimized a little bit though. And again, I don't honestly want the krakens up front because how vulnerable they can be to the fire results, but they're also going to be important for spotting. And am I missing any ships? No, you're part of Group 1 apparently, so This may be as good as possible, but it's still a question if the dual cannon is good or not. Since they can't repair it, I want to say it is. Since what, 4 or 5 fire assaults is amazing. Now, we have no audible rushes, so it's going to be important for this fight. And I want to listen for that as much as possible. Ideally, and start pinpointing where they might be. Since if I don't hear them at all, I can gauge where they can roughly be quite well. And again, these Krakens I don't want taking point in case of pyro-acid, so they serve well as grabbing objectives for me. And the flagship does hang back because, let's see. Alright. So the majority is over on the right, which works well for me. I just gotta get a nice tasty surround in at some point. And this drone will just grab these 2 points, I imagine. Otherwise, how to best engage this? Well, again, it comes down to spraying out their fire, and if they are pyro-acid, trying to abuse their inability to focus targets down. Okay, I'm looking at those, and I'm trying to figure out what kind of ships those are. Okay, torpedoes. So it is a boarding-centric type of fleet. And I like to grab this point. No, you're just gonna rush through. I'm hearing them pretty surprisingly close, which is why I pinged there.
The enemy has seized a strategic area. You have seized
So got the objective, but one's gonna get hit. Only 1 boarding result, so not a big deal. This definitely feels weird, I'm not gonna lie. Well, let's start revealing them, maybe. Okay. No. Sadly, that's kind of why you have to be careful about rushing so early like that, but... Because I'm not going to do nearly as much damage as possible. And the boring damage is not a big deal yet. Alright, just eat everything. And of course my spore did not really do much here. But we can... Oh, I was hoping I had rush available, but I guess not. And I messed up that control amazingly because the Kraken was supposed to get the one on the bottom of that group. Alright. This is becoming an abysmal failure in a hurry. And horrible latency, or hiccups as well, is going to be a big burden as well. Because against all this boring damage, I should be in amazing shape, but it's going to fall apart quickly just because of terrible miscontrol on my part. I thought I had told these Krakens to start rushing. And... Yep. This is over. I miscontrolled that horribly. That was a terrible display on my part.
You have accumulated 25%.
And again, it's a lot of reason why you need to be careful with the rushes, because if you overshoot, then you're not doing any damage at all. So yeah, I got no words for that. Outside trying to redeem myself some. And again, it is a question, Was Chemionic skin even worth it? Because accelerated regeneration could have been good. At least for any light critical hit damage. And otherwise, synaptic control is pointless. Boarding, I wasn't going to rely on boarding for winning there. So yeah. Hard to say what secondary upgrade would have been good. The only one I could realistically think of is the accelerated regeneration though. Alright, so I guess we'll get ourselves our rematch here. Maybe. Although, let's hopefully improve on what mistakes I did before, damn it, because that's not a good testament of what this fleet could do. Although the element of surprise is definitely out of the way, but even then, with just the emphasis on boarding that Asigos has, if he's not able to disengage from me effectively enough, or at least keep distance, then I should still theoretically win this battle. I just gotta make sure I have rushes available, so that kind of also leans into the fact that I don't really want to burn my rushes carelessly. Wait for Asigos to kind of burn them first so that way I'm able to immediately follow him. Although, not being able to slow him down is going to be a bit of a burden. That's also another factor too, since that's a lot of the reason why the spore fields are so important for this type of matchup. And I do kind of wonder if I want Psychic Scream, but that depends on if I'm able to jump the flagship and kill it. That's the assumption anyway. It's safe to assume it probably is going to have the Void Lurker ability. Either way, let's see. At least the drone can serve as a little bit of a detection net for me. Although on the plus side, we found the ships incredibly easily enough. Asigos kind of made that really simple. I just now need to somehow be able to capitalize on that. Which ultimately means I want to force them to rush away, ideally into the rest of my fleet. Kind of like how I accidentally jumped into their flagship in that last match. Otherwise, I'm wondering what that roar is for, because normally it would give me a vague impression of maybe. Oops, Silent Rushes, so that's a factor too. Normally that would give me the impression that maybe they're in like tracking senses. I don't think that's true, but it does give that impression.
The enemy has seized a strategic area.
And we already kind of know where most of the cruisers are. Or at least the battle cruiser. And I didn't really pay much attention. Were there even any frigates for Asigos? That's kind of an important factor too. Because it means I have some freedom to just run in. Or at least not worry about getting detected. Since with me spraying out like this, it's going to be tricky to do. Alright, so we kind of want to turn right and try and engage this head on. Since Asigos is kind of a rush in there.
A strategic area.
And then we'll play the rest. We'll play it by ear from there on out. And even then, just because of the low critical hit chance I mentioned with these ships, I do want the Devourers to kind of go in first. And not so much the light cruisers. Alright. And since I do have Silent Rushes, this helps some. Alright. We found the fleets. Now we just gotta be able to deal with it. Although, if they have torpedoes, that's not terrible either. I just gotta be careful of their broadside arc.
You have seized a strategic area.
Oh, and this of course is a flagship, which is a bit of a burden. I was not quite prepared for that. And that was a terrible rush attempt, another example of what I mean there. At least this can easily be dealt with, but... yeah, the spore shields are also being a factor too. That's another thing to keep in mind. But that hopefully should change in a moment. Because that's 3 cruisers basically dead there. Although, still, this is annoying the way... dang it, that is unfortunate. My rush, or was it? My fire assault did not hit theirs, but... alright, in theory, this flagship should be dead. I gotta actually start playing with my ships now.
You have accumulated 25% of strategic points.
Alright, so I think this is over, despite still feeling like an abysmal case of control, but this ship's gonna break in a moment, and again, no frigates. So I don't know what to make of this mess. It is a little bit odd though, since again the emphasis is on the boarding torpedoes, so you wouldn't expect the pyro-acid, the broadside pyro-acid, to be too scary. Especially if I'm somehow able to hit them in the prow. Keep in mind, my shields would never go down if I'm so lucky. And in theory, my shields can also help accelerate, doing the whole damage. But for a brief period, with my one light cruiser just getting devoured because I couldn't kill their shields, I felt like maybe this was a terrible fleet for that briefest period. Thankfully, again, it goes to what I said. If I can trick them to burn their resources for rushes, and especially that foil lurker, then I can punish them heavily, as made apparent with that flagship. Although, it's kind of almost a mirrored effect to what happened to me in the first match. Let's not kid ourselves. So it's possible maybe I just got lucky there. Okay, let's have ourselves something a little bit different. It's an opponent I don't recognize, but this should be fun. Since I think the moral of this battle is going to be if I can latch on to their prow, then at least the cruiser I'm attacking should be pretty damn screwed. It's just a question if I could tie up the rest of their fleet enough for the damage to sink in, basically. But otherwise, I like the prospect of the prow because, of course, they have very little room to maneuver and disengage from me because of the claws and me basically being clamped onto the front of their ship. And I'm going to assume maybe my opponent recognizes me. Okay, with that said, let's try and continue with my train of thought. Okay, it's going to become difficult to continue with my train of thought, I think, now. But otherwise, now I'm going to feel bad. Although on the plus side, this is a little bit more of an experimental fleet. At least experimental to me, since I think I only played 3, maybe 4 matches in the entirety of Battlefleet Gothic with the massive claws, at least on my streams. I'm sure I played with it a little bit in the early closed beta, mainly for talking about it in my introduction video about the fleet, but I don't think I played a proper multiplayer match. And now I just gave away my entire strategy. My opponent's going to be able to counter my playstyle now. It remains to be seen if that's the case, but... okay, so first impression, this looks like just 4 battleships. Or at the very least, was it 4 carrier exorcist grand cruisers, if I had to imagine? Which serves me incredibly well, if I can get the execution properly. Since these battleships have horrendous turning radius, so even if I don't get on the prow, okay, I'm a little confused there. I'm assuming he was leveling up with Necrons, maybe. But it's going to be one of those matches, is it? Either way. Actually, the one important thing I should try and do is set ramming engagement. This may be maybe not as effective as it could be, since as soon as my massive claws die, I start taking ramming damage. And also my behavior also changes as a result of the massive claws getting destroyed. So it's something I'm going to have to watch and keep an eye on. Nope. Now, with that said, where's the beacon going? Okay, that's convenient. I can dodge that effectively enough. But I really did like the Shroud Fleet because it offered a different type of playstyle compared to at least what all other Necron players utilize, which almost, well, I guess we can kind of assume just due to the nature of most of my opponents, going as heavy as they can on either battleships or at least the most impactful ships they have. We see it in all sorts of different setup. Alright, so we have an Oberon, 2 Emperors, alright, 2 Emperors and 2 Oberons, okay. Let's see. We are going to be revealed, if only briefly. But we can use this as bait really well. To an extent. And they are only... yeah, they're carrier ships, so their firepower is incredibly limited, but you can see kind of what I mean about how fragile these light cruisers can potentially be. Don't know so much for brawling so much, but I think this light cruiser is pretty much dead until I get my engagement set up. Thankfully, the Krakens are pretty well equipped to deal with like such limited amount of firepower outside the bombers.
You have seized a strategic
So we might do well just due to the inexperience of my opponent here. It's possible, since so long as these fighters are out, I don't have to worry about taking much damage from the bombers anyway. And if scanner pulses too. Yes, flee! And in the meantime, we'll just grab... well, fighters are being recalled, so this is where it gets scary now. And apparently I was oh, that was due to scanner pulse, that's why. And this is where the spore field becomes amazing. I just couldn't tell you if that was the spore field that I deployed or not. I'm assuming it is, but I did lose a couple of Krakens as well. Now you can potentially intercept. We are getting ramming damage in. Now, I'm getting hit by bombers, so keep that in mind. So, these Krakens are not long for this world. But they're doing what needs to be done, truth be told. I think what I want to do is get these intercept. If I can continue to burn. Yeah, burn their combustion gauge, and then I can eventually do the damage necessary. Tail end's going to be a bit awkward, though. And to a limited extent, I could probably like side strafe with this ship too, to kind of avoid taking damage, but spore fields are a little more limited. Alright, so this is likely going to die to the boarding. I was hoping to rush with that. Now, can we do what's needed? It's not looking promising so far, I suppose, just since the bombers are actually doing surprisingly well against my Krakens. But now, nope. Turn. I don't want to take prow damage, ideally. Now that we're actually in our sweet spot right now, sort of. Although my movement behavior on this flagship is being stubborn because of the close proximity. Yeah, it just doesn't want to move because of the awkwardness here. And I hope I don't ram my own ship. Okay, this is looking promising now. Mutiny on the flagship. That's dead. And keep the flagship out of harm's way, ideally. Oh, we got a mutiny there. Alright. I won't lie, that was a little bit scary for me for a brief period. It might still be scary, let's not get too complacent. Since normally, I would feel pretty safe being on their backside. But the fact that they're a carrier-heavy type of fleet means they can do a notable amount of damage at range. Oh boy. Keep in mind, this thing's about to burn to death too.
You have accumulated
Oh god, really? We lost just barely because the flagship took a lot of damage there. The flagship dying just straight up killed me, which is unfortunate. And it shows how imperative that thing needs to stay alive. Well, that's a bit embarrassing, isn't it? Although I have to double check the recording. Was I able to use the void lurker or not? But yeah, if that was like retributions or anything else, I wouldn't be so worried being behind them, because they have terrible turning speed, so I could kind of hound them all day, so long as I'm close enough to not take occasional fire from their lances and the macro cannons. Okay, so it's another Imperial Navy matchup, which I look forward to. Let's just hopefully destroy our opponent in embarrassing fashion, though. Unlike me being embarrassed by just barely missing out on victory, just because of the synaptic trait, which is a lot of the reason why I have the Void Lurker ability. The flagship ideally should not be trying to engage the entirety of their fleet. At least that way it allows it to hang back a little bit safer. And even if I do get aggressive with it, the idea is I should be able to just safely jump out, if I'm smart about how I do my jumping. Which, in all honesty, is probably in question with these series of matches so far, but I like the prospect of it some, and it shows that the flagship is definitely my biggest burden if it ever gets killed from any careless maneuvers. Otherwise, I suspect the most of the fleet's going to be over here, so I think I want the drone to just grab this point. And then everything else will be in preparation to maybe swarm anyone that may try to grab this objective. Ideally. But otherwise, I do like the idea of the fleet. It's just, again, very limited experience with it. And the few times I have played it seems to work incredibly well, but I can't remember if I did an incredibly wide berth with my formation. At least that way it's almost impossible for like the entirety of the fleet, because in that last match, for example, my entire fleet was all bunched up together outside maybe a few Krakens, which probably caused a lot of problems there. It definitely made it difficult for me to punish and distract them when they're able to harass me for free. Oh, and it looks like it's another 4 battleship type of fleet. If I had to guess. There, let's correct this. I'll definitely be watching for if there are any fighter bays. So beacon, where exactly are you going? If I had to guess. Well, it's not quite going to the objective, I think. It's close, but not quite. So let's just get on going. I can't remember, was the rush audible? Yeah, it is audible, and we have a frigate to worry about. So we'll just take our time and try and be patient with this. Make sure everything's ready to start jumping them, ideally all at once. And also, I do want to keep an eye out for fighter bays. At least that'll give us a tell what exactly we're up against.
A strategic area.
These ships should be able to avoid detection really well. Just gotta make sure the battle cruiser kind of tags along, although I didn't want you rushing. And while they'll get revealed, actually, yeah, they'll get revealed. That shouldn't amount to too much just yet, outside my actual strategy. So they'll know there's massive claws. What are they going to do about it? Although, they actually might detect the flagship due to that awkward proximity.
You have seized a strategic area.
Let's get ourselves ready. Actually, scanner pulse might be useful. No frigate nearby.
You have seized a strategic area.
And let's try and take advantage of that, shall we? Before the frigate catches up with everyone else. Come on, you guys, stop slacking off on me. And what was scanner pulsed? Absolutely nothing. So that's a convenience. Stop burning retros and we'll get ready for this. We're going to engage them head on this time. Huh. So apparently there are a couple light cruisers around. Because we got a mixed fleet here of Lunars, Armageddons, and not battleships, oddly enough. Now, munch on our fleet. Although, so far, decent damage. Now continue to munch. And this will definitely hurt because it's an actual battlecruiser colliding. Torpedoes aren't going to do nothing there. Not nearly as much because I rushed. And again, here's the sign of the ramming being messed up a tiny bit. Because I want... this battlecruiser's not cooperating with me. Although still, it's a good amount of damage already to start off with. Spore fields are about to take place. Come on. You are being very stubborn. I do not like you, you silly devourer. But spore oh, it's probably because of proximity of the friendly units. That's where this problem's coming from. Because again, my flagship is also not cooperating. And I do have a foil lurker, so I don't feel too worried yet, but that's where I need to learn the nuances with this fleet. But even then, just the one rush there did an absurd amount of damage. Now flagship, get on out, although I did forget to board. That was a bit of a failing. And just devour our crew. And now they're stuck in this field, the spore field. That's all she wrote. This is how the match was supposed to play out before, but the bombers were surprisingly awkward, and of course the angle I attacked from was probably terrible too. And just watch the behavior on this battle cruiser right now, this flagship. Maybe that was causing me a lot of the problems there. Because if they're going to rebel against me, then not only am I fighting my opponent, I'm fighting myself. Or fighting my fleet to manage this. Got some good torpedo hits there, so I'm happy for him in that regard. And foil lurker's up already. Now, devour, feast, and send this thing cruising. Also, let's find... oh, there's a frigate friend. 2 frigates, no less. Can we get a double whammy? Yes, we can. I was so excited for getting double ram in on those 2 light cruisers. Not meant to be. But like I was saying before, this looks like it's over already. But then we got foiled due to the flagship getting killed. This time, I think I can safely say the flagship's gonna live, still being at full health for crying out loud. So I think we're in the gold here. This will definitely be a victory. And it's definitely a lot of fun when it works as it should. Although Krakens, start eating. Start devouring our poor little frigates. There's the devil hit you'll love to see. Just like with the Imperial Navy when I was focusing on them for my legend ranking attempt, it's so satisfying when you can get multiple rams in like that. It's a lot of fun when it works. I don't need to tell you how difficult it is for that to work though. But yeah, more experimentation is probably required, just to understand the nuances. Cause hell, my fleet kind of rebelling against me just due to the close proximity of the rest of the friendly ships made that a lot more complicated than it probably needed to. So maybe I should play with this some more, just to fine-tune it some. Because I do love I love the aspect of this fleet, and I want to argue this is what you think of when you think Tyranids. Because hell, the cinematic for crying out loud, or at least some of the trailers, was showing a damn devoured eating a battlecruiser whole after all. So why not carry on with that fantasy?